Hey everyone, and welcome to Way Out of History, the podcast where we share personal testimonies, dive deep into the odd, the unbelievable, and the completely true stories from history that'll make you say, wait, that actually happened? I'm Aaron Baker, and today we're tackling not one, but two bizarre tales that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. In the first half of today's episode, we're going to a small town in Colorado in 1945, where a rooster named Mike made headlines by living without a head. Yes, you heard that right. A living, breathing, headless chicken. And he didn't just flop around for a few seconds. Oh no. Mike went on tour. Then we're rewinding the clock a few hundred years and hopping across the pond to 16th century France, where an entire town started dancing uncontrollably, both day and night. Some people even danced themselves to death. What caused it? Divine punishment? Poisoned bread? Collective madness? Get ready and let's dive in. Our story begins in Fruita, Colorado, in September of 1945. The world was just coming out of World War II. Soldiers were returning home. Towns were quiet again, and Lloyd Olson, a farmer, was preparing chickens for market. Lloyd and his wife Claire were processing about 40 to 50 birds that day. He would decapitate the chickens, and Claire would clean and pluck them. Business as usual. Until one rooster didn't go down the way he was supposed to. This bird, an American breed, stood up and walked away, still headless. Understandably, Lloyd and Clara were stunned. Now, it's not completely unheard of for chickens to twitch after decapitation, spinal cord reflexes and all that, but this wasn't no mere twitch. This chicken, who would later be named Mike, just kept walking around like he had things to do. That night, the Olsons placed Mike in a box on their porch, probably thinking he'd pass away in his sleep, but the next morning, he was still there, alive, breathing, pecking at the air where his beak used to be. So, what do you do when you have a headless, living chicken? Well, you feed it with an eyedropper. You clear its throat with a syringe, and then, naturally, you take it to market and start betting strangers that you've got a live headless bird in your wagon. Word spread fast. Within weeks, Mike had gone viral. Well, as viral as you could be in 1945. A sideshow promoter from Utah named Hope Wade heard the story and offered the Olsons a business deal. Take Mike on the road, put him on display, make some money. And so they did. Mike became a sensation. Life magazine covered his story. He toured the country, California, Arizona, the Southeast. People lined up to see the miracle chicken. He even had a manager. But how was any of this even possible? Well, Mike was examined by scientists at the University of Utah. Well, it turns out Lloyd's axe stroke was oddly surgical. While Mike lost most of his head, including his eyes, beak, and one ear, he retained the lower brainstem. That's the part that controls basic functions like breathing and heart rate. A lucky blood clot saved him from bleeding out, and with food and water delivered straight into his throat, Mike kept on clucking. He lived for 18 months. But unfortunately, in 1947, a mere 18 months after the incident, while staying in a motel in Phoenix, Mike started choking during the night. The Olsons had left their cleaning syringe at the sideshow earlier that day. They couldn't clear his throat in time. Mike died, but not from the decapitation, but from mucus. Lloyd, maybe out of guilt, told folks he'd sold Mike to another promoter. But years later, he confessed the truth to his great-grandson. Mike had died in the motel. Today, Mike's legacy lives on in Fruita, Colorado, where they host an annual Mike the Headless Chicken Festival, compete with a 5K run, music and food, and plenty of headless chicken merch. So if you ever feel like running around like a chicken with his head cut off, just remember, Mike did it first, and he got famous for it. So now that we covered Mike, let's rewind the clock about 400 years to the summer of 1518 in the town of Strasbourg, modern-day France. One morning, a woman stepped out of her house and started dancing. No music, no party, just dancing. She moved through the streets, arms flailing, feet stomping, seemingly possessed by some invisible beat. Then, more people joined her. 10, 20, 50. By the end of the week, it was over 400 people spontaneously dancing. They danced in the streets. They danced in alleyways. They danced until their feet bled. Some reportedly collapsed from exhaustion. Others may have died from heart attacks or strokes brought on by non-stop movement. What was this sensation? Well, it became known as the dancing plague. Now, mass dancing wasn't entirely unheard of. Between the 7th and 17th century, Europe had dozens of similar outbreaks, random episodes where groups would suddenly start dancing for days on end. In fact, some historians think stories like the Pied Piper of Hamelin stem from these weird and strange events. One 13th century account describes children in Germany dancing 20 miles from one town to another, eerily similar to the Pied Piper tale. But the 1518 outbreak in Strasbourg was one of the most infamous. City officials were baffled. They turned to doctors who confidently blamed the heat. Literally, overheated blood in the brain, they would say. So, what did the city do? They built a stage. That's right, they built a stage. They brought in pipers and drummers and even hired people to hold up dancers too tired to stand. The logic? Let them dance it out. Sweat the illness away. You're probably wondering, did it actually work? No, it did not. Eventually, the authorities tried the opposite approach. Music and dancing were banned. I guess you could say it was like a real-life Footloose. The dancers were taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, a saint believed to curse people into dancing. They were dressed in red shoes, led in ritual dances around the shrine, and finally, after several days, the dancing stopped. So what exactly caused this random outburst of dancing? Well, in the 1500s, most people believed in divine punishment. Flood, plague, crop failure, all signs of God's displeasure. And many people believed this was the wrath of not God, but of Saint Vitus. Today, we have a few different theories about what was going on. One is poisoning, caused by mold that grows on rye. It causes hallucinations, seizures, and convulsions. Some people compare it to a form of LSD, but there's a problem with that theory. That type of poisoning doesn't usually cause coordinated movement like dancing, and it affects people differently. The more accepted theory today is mass hysteria, what we now call psychogenic illness. Basically, psychological distress manifests in physical symptoms. And Strasbourg had reasons to be stressed. The region had just gone through years of famine, disease, and extreme religious anxiety. Life was hard there, and belief in divine wrath was very real. If you thought not dancing might offend God even more, well, you might dance too. Once people started, the fear of not dancing might have driven others to join in. It was a perfect storm of fear, stress, belief, and maybe a little suggestibility. Eventually, as science, medicine, and living conditions improved, these outbreaks eventually stopped. But the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the most strangest episodes in European history. So, you're probably wondering, what do these two incidents have to do with each other? What does a headless chicken and a town full of dancing people have in common? Well, in a way, both are stories about how humans react to the bizarre. One is about resilience in the face of biology, the other about the mind's power in the times of crisis. And both remind us that history is full of mysteries, some explained and some not. Well, that's all I got for today's episode of Way Out of History. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen. And if you've got a weird history fact or story you'd like us to cover, reach out on our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So, until next time, I'm your host, Aaron Baker. And remember, the past is full of surprises, if you're willing to look. God bless, Jesus loves you, and have a great day.